My main memory of CAM is of a short but very intense period, just a few years between 1966 and 1972, when deep and creative friendships were forged. It was a period which lived on for many years afterwards in a variety of ways. Thinking about it for this introduction to the GPI's CAM archives, I am amazed at how much was going on in the UK at that time, both politically and culturally, and much of which affected CAM and its members. Malcolm X visited London in 1965, followed soon after by his assassination. Nkrumah fell from power in 1966, and the closing down of African Unity House as a base for African independence struggles based in the UK. Stokely Carmichael visited London in 1967, and the Dialectics of Liberation Conference. The Black Panthers, Black Power, and civil rights movements in the USA. In the Caribbean, the New World Movement, Trinidad Black Power Revolt, the banning of Rodney from Jamaica, Jagan's PPP in Guyana, to name just a few of the bubbling pots. And in the UK, the growth of Black British experience based on the concerns of the newly arrived West Indian Windrush generation. During the early years of CAM, Warishi nights, as they were called, often took place in members' homes. These were informal but intense discussions. People often gathered at the Brathwaite student flat in Mecklenburgh Square after the more formal public meetings. They provided people with the space and time to share their ideas, their concerns, their enthusiasms, excitements at the deepest level. The three founders of CAM brought varied life experiences and contacts to the CAM table. Andrew Salkey from Jamaica had been longest in the UK and had a wide circle of friends and colleagues here. By 1966, he was already a published novelist and children's story writer, as well as a successful radio journalist. Kamal Brathwaite from Barbados had spent some time in Ghana between his first degree in Cambridge and coming to Sussex University to do a history PhD in 1965-66. John LaRose from Trinidad, having been deeply involved in the political and cultural scene there to the detriment of his employability, had come to London to study law and equip himself with an independent profession. By the end of the 1960s, the profound creativity of CAM's intense early years was diminishing and giving way to the more prosaic demands of daily life. John saw this as a natural development in the life of an organisation, commenting how movements like CAM are profoundly creative for a time, but then if they continue, they have to do so with a more formal structure. People then proceed to do what they have to do as they were doing it before, but profoundly affected by their experience. That certainly was the case with CAM, and many of the links and friendships formed then have lasted a lifetime.
In March 1967, I was fortunate enough to be in the Janetta Cochrane Theatre in London to see Eddie Braffett perform his long poem, Rites of Passage, to a packed audience. This was, in many ways, a formal launch of the Caribbean Artist Movement and its program of monthly meetings at the West Indian Student Centre in Earl's Court, which I attended avidly. A little 20-year-old white boy sitting in the back trying to absorb the wisdom and the creativity flashing from face to face, from head to head. It was exhilarating to watch all these Caribbean luminaries, Wilson Harris, Andrew Salkey, Eddie Braffett, John LaRose, Ken Ramchan, Gordon Roullier, Michael Anthony, etc., etc. It just goes on. And in 1968, attending the second CAM conference at the University of Kent, where I obviously remember because Wilson Harris collared me and sat me down and leafed through my folder of poems and paintings and complimented me on them and likened them to Hart Crane, who I knew nothing about at that time, but still a very heady moment for me. In '69, I was appointed assistant to Donald Hines, who became editor of the Caribbean Artist Movement newsletter. As assistant, that meant I typed it all out on Gestetner stencils, running it off on an old Gestetner machine that previously belonged to Edric Connor. And we got art students, Caribbean art students in London to design colorful covers, which we screen printed right there.
When John came to London in 1961, he had a clear vision that people needed to have control over knowledge and about their own history and experience. Publishing for him was a vehicle to give an independent validation to one's own culture, history and politics, a sense of self. In the summer of 1966, John and I were able to realize his dream when we founded New Beacon Publishing. So New Beacon and CAM were founded in the same year and developed closely together over the next exciting years of CAM's very active and intense short existence. CAM activities stimulated the early growth of New Beacon as a publisher, but also as a book service. They provided space for New Beacon to sell their own titles, but very soon, particularly after the first CAM conference in 1967, stimulated demand for a much wider range of titles, which New Beacon was able to provide. The book service developed. We moved to selling books from our house in 1969, and 4 years later, moved to our current location in Stroud Green Road. The intense activism of CAM was very much mirrored in New Beacon.
So in '71, I returned home to Trinidad in full CAM mode. CAM represented to me a whole new vision going forward. I grew up in a house which was avidly West Indian Federation. You could see the flag there behind me. I saw and experienced my parents and their friends from all over the Caribbean, all the artists that came to flock to Trinidad during the Federation, and their excitement and the tremendous depression and trauma that resulted from the dissolution of the Federation. So CAM offered a new opening, because it wasn't just Anglophone Caribbean, it was all the phones, all the language blocks, all the lands that lapped on onto the Caribbean Sea. So it was a whole new area to go into. And consequently, I started a magazine called Kairi, which showed poems, short stories, drama, paintings, drawings, etc. And this was co-edited by Victor Cattell. And we started also a drama group called Iswi, and a theatre in East Port of Spain, where we produced a number of programs, both plays written by the group. We also produced oral poets such as Abdul Malik from Trinidad and Bruce St. John from Barbados, who we published as part of the Kairi publication. In '75, I became part of the formation of Banyan, the Southern Caribbean's first television program production unit, independent of any station. And we produced 400 films over the last 40 years, including, for example, in true CAM mode, The Caribbean Eye, which was the first and still is the only television series that looks at Caribbean culture as a whole, with a 13-part series. And in 2004, we started our own television station called Gael the Channel, which was modeled after our very successful television series, which ran for 5 years, called Gael, which was a program looking at Caribbean cultural activities, both in Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean. A weekly program, went to 300 episodes. In 2012, I retired from the station and concentrated on the digitizing of our vast archive of over 3,000 tapes. And this resulted in an archive of 15,000 records, minutely catalogued. And it is, as far as we know again, the largest digitized video catalogue or archive of Caribbean culture and society in existence. Archives are extremely important in our region, not only to generate, but to make accessible. Hence, my enthusiasm for encouraging the CAM archive initiative that this is part of. I wish CAM archive luck.
I believe the archive collection is very important, as the core of it comes out of the meticulous research that Anne Wormsley did for her PhD. I remember her coming to the house to talk to John about it. Having been a dedicated and enthusiastic CAM member, she knew that for her to do a good history, she would need access to the original reel-to-reel tapes of the monthly meetings, at that time stored mainly on the top shelf of a cupboard in our house. She not only arranged for these tapes to be transferred to CD cassettes, she also got them all transcribed. For her PhD, Anne interviewed as many of the CAM members as she could find to hear their memories after 20 years. She donated all these valuable materials to the GPI. They, together with connected correspondence and other ephemera, provided the core of the CAM archive. She also adapted the text for the general reader, and her study, Caribbean Artist Movement, 1962 to 66, was published by New Beacon Books in 1992. It has become a classic study of this influential movement. I want to salute her important role, both as author but also as a pioneering educational publisher at Longman's Caribbean in the late 1960s and beyond. It is thanks to her commitment and diligence that the GPI has such a rich CAM archive. It was one of the first archives that our amazing archivist Sarah Garrow catalogued for the GPI, and has been a bedrock of our collection ever since, attracting researchers, students and the wider public alike.